My mom said it was just a family meeting. Something small, something simple, something I shouldn't overthink. But when I walked through that door, the air felt wrong, heavy, rehearsed, like everyone had practiced their lines except me. 5 lawyers, 3 relatives I hadn't seen in years, a stack of documents already waiting for my signature, and my mother smiling like she'd finally cornered me. They thought I'd panic. They thought I'd cave. But as they closed in, threatening, pressuring, insisting the inheritance was better off with them, I simply counted them one by one and revealed the one person I brought with me. Stay with us. This amazing story will leave you speechless. Before we get started, hit like, share, and subscribe, and drop your location in the comments. I don't know why I even hesitated before opening the message. Maybe because my mother never texted me unless she wanted something. Maybe because the last time she said, "We need to talk." It ended with her trying to convince me to sell my father's old house so she could invest the money into her boyfriend's failing landscaping business. But when her message popped up on my screen that morning, "Family meeting tonight. Very important. Please come." My stomach tightened like it recognized danger before my mind did. Most families have dinners, birthdays, celebrations. Mine only had meetings that felt less like gatherings and more like summons. Still, something about this one felt different, too abrupt, too formal, too conveniently labeled very important without explanation. My mother never used words like that unless she was trying to put pressure on me. All day, the message stuck to the back of my mind like a piece of gum on the bottom of my shoe. I kept rereading it, trying to figure out what she was really asking for. She didn't say who would be there. She didn't mention the reason. She didn't even ask how I was doing, which, honestly, told me everything I needed to know. By late afternoon, the uneasiness had grown into a full, nagging ache in my chest. I even considered ignoring the message altogether, pretending I never saw it. But then, curiosity started whispering, reminding me that my mother didn't call family meetings unless she was planning something big or something bad. So finally, against every instinct screaming at me to stay home, I grabbed my keys, took a long breath, and decided to go. Because if my mother was plotting something, I needed to see it for myself. And deep down, I already suspected this wasn't a meeting. It was a trap. People think inheritances only cause drama in movies, but in my family, the tension started long before my father's will was ever read. Maybe that's why nobody talks about it. Maybe that's why everyone pretends it's just some pile of money sitting in an account instead of what it really is, the last piece of a man who held our family together until the day he didn't. My father wasn't rich, not in the flashy way people imagine, but he worked hard, saved harder, and believed in preparing for the future. He left behind investments, a modest property, and a few accounts with more zeros than my mother ever expected. And the moment she realized everything was in my name, not hers, something in her changed, or maybe it finally revealed who she had always been. I still remember the day the will was read. The lawyer spoke gently, like he knew he was stepping through a minefield. My mother sat stiff in her chair, her eyes wide, her jaw tense. When the lawyer said, "Your father designated you as the sole beneficiary," the room didn't just go silent, it froze. My mother didn't look at me. She didn't congratulate me. She didn't even cry. She just stared at the lawyer like he had personally robbed her. My relatives weren't any better. Aunts and uncles who barely visited suddenly remembered my father raising them, helping them, supporting them. Cousins who never called sent messages dripping in fake sympathy. Everyone wanted a piece of what he left, a piece of me. And because my father knew my mother better than anyone, he added a line that changed everything. "Distribution shall occur only when my daughter feels safe, prepared, and completely certain of her decisions." Safe, prepared, certain. 3 things my mother hated waiting for. So ever since that day, the inheritance became a storm cloud hanging over every conversation. They pretended patience. They pretended love. But underneath it all, their eyes kept drifting toward the thing they believed belonged to them. And I learned quickly, greed can turn blood into strangers. By the time I pulled into my mother's driveway, the sun had already dipped behind the trees, leaving the yard washed in a strange bluish shadow. It wasn't late, but the house felt darker than usual. Too quiet, too still, like it was holding its breath. Normally there'd be noise, a TV humming, someone arguing on speakerphone, the scraping of a chair. But that night, the silence wrapped around the house like a warning. The porch light flickered as I walked up the steps, buzzing faintly like it was nervous too. I paused at the door, my hand hovering over the knob. I could have walked away. I could have texted an excuse and gone home, pretended I never got the message. But something pulled me inside. Curiosity, fear, or maybe just the exhaustion of being suspicious all the time. The moment I stepped through the doorway, the air shifted. It smelled faintly of perfume and old paper, like a hotel lobby pretending to be fancy. My mother's living room looked staged. The good candles were lit. The expensive vase she never touched was centered perfectly on the table. Even the couch cushions looked unnaturally straight, as though someone had pressed them into place. But what struck me most wasn't the decor. It was the faces. 5 people sat around the room, dressed too neatly for a casual gathering. 2 uncles I hadn't seen since last Christmas, an aunt who always pretended to care, and 2 cousins who looked uncomfortable, but determined. Their eyes snapped toward me the second I entered, and the room tightened with expectation. My mother appeared from the hallway wearing a smile so stretched it looked painful. "There you are," she said sweetly, like she hadn't spent the last 2 years trying to manipulate me into signing away my inheritance. "We were just waiting for you." I glanced again at the room, the formal seating, the stiff posture, the anticipatory silence. This wasn't a family meeting. It was an ambush, and every instinct I had screamed that whatever happened next wasn't going to be good. My mother motioned for me to sit, her hand fluttering in the air like a nervous hostess trying too hard to appear calm. But the moment I stepped further into the living room, I saw them. 2 men in gray suits sitting near the far wall, briefcases open, documents spread neatly across the coffee table. They weren't family, they weren't friends, and they definitely weren't there for a casual discussion. Lawyers. My chest tightened, not because I feared them, but because their presence confirmed my worst suspicion. This entire meeting had been planned without me, rehearsed without me, and set up to corner me. One of the lawyers stood as if he'd been waiting for a cue. "Thank you for joining us," he said, completely skipping any greeting. His voice had that polished calmness lawyers practice in front of mirrors. "We have some matters to discuss regarding your father's estate." My father's estate, of course. I didn't respond. I just looked around the room, taking in the guilty faces, the forced smiles, the almost hungry anticipation. My relatives sat straighter, like they were witnessing a ceremony. One where I was expected to surrender something valuable. My mother clasped her hands together dramatically. "Sweetheart, we didn't want to overwhelm you," she began, her voice coated in artificial sympathy. "But it's time we finalize things. The money, the property, it's too much responsibility for one person." There it was, finally said out loud. The lawyer slid a stack of documents toward me. Pages of legal jargon, signature lines already bookmarked with neat yellow tabs. "We've prepared the transfer forms," he explained. "All you need to do is sign. Your family will help manage the inheritance properly." Help manage, meaning take. My pulse didn't spike. My hands didn't shake. I simply stood there, staring at the documents they had expected me to sign without question. My mother leaned closer, whispering urgently, "This is for the good of the family. Don't make this difficult." Difficult? They had ambushed me in my childhood living room, like I was a criminal. I slowly lowered myself into the chair they'd reserved for me. It faced all of them, like a defendant facing a panel. The lawyer pushed a pen toward me. Everyone watched. Everyone waited. And that was the moment I confirmed what I had sensed the second I walked in. They hadn't invited me to discuss anything. They had invited me to surrender. My mother folded her hands on her lap like she was preparing for a performance she'd rehearsed in the mirror. Her voice softened, dripping with the kind of sweetness she only used when she wanted something badly. "Honey, look at me," she whispered, tilting her head the way she used to when I was a child, and she wanted me to apologize for something I didn't do. "No one here is against you. We're your family. We're trying to help." Help? That word sounded sour coming from her. She leaned forward, eyes wide with crafted worry. "You've been carrying so much since your father passed. Too much, really. Managing the accounts, the property, the decisions. It's not fair to expect you to handle everything alone." Funny how she never worried about fairness when she needed money, favors, or sympathy. But now suddenly, fairness mattered. She took a slow, shaky breath, a dramatic one, and placed her hand on her chest like she was about to faint. "You're still young. You should be enjoying your life, focusing on your future, not drowning in responsibilities you weren't prepared for." My cousins nodded like obedient background actors. My uncles murmured in agreement. The lawyer even pretended to look compassionate. Then her voice dipped lower, almost trembling. "I know your father meant well, but he didn't understand how complicated things would become. He didn't realize how much stress he was putting on you. We just want to take that burden off your shoulders." There it was. Blame the dead man who could no longer defend his choices. She reached out, lightly touching the stack of documents. "If you let us handle the inheritance, we can do it together. As a family, we can use the money wisely. Investments, repairs, debts." She hesitated before adding softly, "Things you don't need to worry about." Her eyes met mine, glossy with fake emotion. "Please, sweetheart, don't fight us on this. Just sign. Let us take care of everything." The room held its breath, waiting for me to fold. But all I could think was, she wasn't asking to help me. She was asking to strip me of the only thing she couldn't control. The moment my mother finished her performance, the rest of the room seemed to wake up, like they had been given permission to join the attack. My Uncle Robert leaned forward first, elbows on his knees, eyes narrowing like he was the head of some family council. "Listen," he said, in that condescending tone he reserved for people he thought were stupid, "your mother is right. Handling that kind of money isn't simple. You're inexperienced. You could make mistakes that affect all of us." All of us. There it was. The real problem. My father's inheritance wasn't theirs, but they felt entitled to it anyway. Aunt Marlene chimed in next, pressing a hand dramatically to her forehead. "You don't understand the responsibility you're carrying. Bills, taxes, investments. It's overwhelming. We're just trying to protect you." Protect me. The same woman who once borrowed $5,000 from my father and never paid it back suddenly cared about my financial well-being. My younger cousin Jason, who hadn't said a word since I arrived, finally spoke up. "Honestly, it just makes sense to let people who know what they're doing manage the money. You're emotional right now. You might not be thinking clearly." I almost laughed. He thought I wasn't thinking clearly? He once bought a used motorcycle with no engine issues, and then discovered it didn't even have an engine. The pressure came from all angles, each voice layering over the last until the room felt smaller and smaller. "You'll ruin your future. You're being selfish. You're not listening to reason. You're dividing the family. It's not about the money." Which, of course, meant it was exactly about the money. Even the lawyers joined in smoothly, like this was a negotiation session they ran 3 times a day. "This is standard procedure," one said. "Your relatives simply want to ensure financial stability for everyone involved." Everyone involved. Funny how everyone was involved except the one who actually inherited the estate. Their voices blended into a single, relentless chorus, pushing, nudging, insisting I sign. They thought pressure would break me, but all it did was show me how desperate they really were. When guilt didn't work and pressure didn't crack me, the mood in the room shifted fast. Like someone had flipped a switch. The smiles faded. The concerned tones dissolved. And suddenly, everyone stopped pretending this was a loving family discussion. Uncle Robert's voice hardened first. "You're making a huge mistake," he said, sitting back with his arms crossed. "If you refuse to cooperate, we'll have to take legal action. The family has rights, too." Rights? My father's will didn't mention any of them, but threats don't need to be true to sting. They just need to be loud. Aunt Marlene leaned in, her eyes sharp. "You know your mother has struggled financially. Are you really going to let her suffer while you hoard money you didn't even earn? What kind of daughter does that?" There it was, the weaponized guilt. My mother stayed quiet at first, but her silence felt heavier than their words. Then she exhaled dramatically. "If you walk away tonight," she said softly, "don't expect us to be here for you when you need us. Families support each other. If you won't support us, why should we support you?" Support? What support had I ever received from them? But she said it like she believed it. Then one of the lawyers cleared his throat, sliding another document forward. "If you choose to withhold funds that could assist struggling family members," he said, "it may reflect negatively in the event of any financial disputes. Court involvement can become complicated." He didn't outright threaten to sue me. He just wrapped the threat in polite vocabulary. Jason, awkward but emboldened by the group, added, "We're not asking for everything, just what's fair. If you refuse to divide the inheritance, people will talk. You'll ruin relationships you can't repair." I stared around the room, watching as their desperation leaked through their words. The guilt, the shame, the warnings, the veiled threats. None of it was about my well-being. It was about access, control, money. They didn't want to protect me. They wanted to punish me for not giving them what they believed they deserved. And for the first time that night, I realized something important. They were afraid I might actually say no. The room buzzed with tension, voices still echoing their warnings and guilt-soaked demands. But inside my chest, everything went quiet. Not numb, not shocked, just still, like the moment before a storm decides whether to break the sky or pass silently overhead. I reached toward the stack of documents, and for a split second, everyone straightened, convinced they had finally worn me down. My mother even let out a relieved breath, her shoulders relaxing as if victory was already in her hands. But instead of picking up the pen, I simply turned the papers around and pushed them back across the table. The room froze. My voice didn't rise. I didn't yell or defend myself or explain why their arguments were wrong. I just spoke calmly, almost gently. No. One word, soft, steady, unshakable. My mother blinked twice, confusion rippling across her face like she couldn't process such a simple rejection. "Honey, maybe you misunderstood." "I didn't," I said, still calm. "I'm not signing anything." Uncle Robert scoffed, leaning forward aggressively. "Don't be ridiculous. You can't just refuse. We're offering you help." "I didn't ask for help." Aunt Marlene's jaw dropped. "You're being emotional. You need to think about the consequences." "I have," I replied. "More than you realize." My even tone bothered them more than any shouting ever could. They expected panic, tears, fear, maybe confusion. But calm? Calm meant control. And they hated that I had it. My mother tried again, her smile stretching too wide. "You're overwhelmed. I get it. But let's talk this through. Don't make rash choices." I met her eyes steadily. The only rash choice here was assuming I'd let you ambush me." Her face twitched, just for a moment. And that moment was enough, because now the power had shifted. Their arguments suddenly felt weak. Their threats felt hollow. Their performance fell apart. And for the first time that night, they realized something they never expected. I wasn't cornered. I wasn't confused. I wasn't intimidated. I knew exactly what I was doing, and I was done letting them make decisions for me. The silence after my refusal was sharper than any of their threats. No one moved. No one breathed. It was the kind of stillness that happens right before something snaps. My mother's smile faltered, twitching at the edges like it was stitched onto her face. "You're making a scene," she whispered. "No," I said quietly. "I'm making a decision." That was when I noticed something. The way their eyes darted between me and the papers, between each other, between the lawyers. They weren't just expecting me to sign. They were counting on it. So I decided to count too. I leaned back in my chair and slowly raised my hand, pointing at each person in the room, one by one. "One," I said softly, finger aimed at Uncle Robert. His eyebrow shot up. "What the hell are you doing?" "2," I continued, turning toward Aunt Marlene. She stiffened, clutching her scarf like a shield. "3." My finger drifted to Jason, whose face went pale. The room rippled with confusion. No one spoke. No one dared interrupt. Even the lawyers exchanged nervous glances. My mother's voice finally cracked. "Stop it! What are you counting?" I lowered my hand and gave a small, deliberate smile, one they hadn't seen from me before. "I'm counting how many people tried to manipulate me tonight," I said. "How many people thought cornering me would work?" My mother swallowed hard. "Honey, please." But I wasn't finished. "And I'm counting," I added, leaning forward, "how many people have absolutely no idea what's about to happen next?" Their expressions shifted instantly, from confusion to worry to fear, because for the first time all night, they realized something. I wasn't outnumbered. I was prepared, and they were about to find out exactly what that meant. Their panic was deliciously quiet, subtle twitches, darting eyes, stiffened shoulders. My mother looked from face to face, searching for someone who understood what I meant. No one did, and that was the point. I let the silence stretch before I spoke again. "You counted on surprising me," I said, tapping the stack of documents they'd shoved my way. "But you never asked who might be surprising you." Uncle Robert frowned. "What are you talking about?" I stood slowly, smoothing my hands over my jacket like I was preparing for a speech. "You invited 5 people to corner me," I said, "so I brought one person of my own." My mother's face went stiff. "You brought someone?" "Oh, yes." I walked toward the hallway with calm, deliberate steps. I figured if this was a legal discussion, I should bring the right kind of company. A ripple of unease moved through the room. One of the lawyers shifted in his chair, suddenly uncertain of his position. My aunt tightened the grip on her purse like it could protect her. Then I stepped aside, and he walked in. Tall, confident, dressed in a charcoal suit sharper than any in the room, a leather folder in one hand, expression unreadable, but intimidating enough to drain the color from my family's faces. "Good evening," he said smoothly, scanning each relative like he was cataloging their guilt. "I'm attorney Marcus Hale, here on behalf of my client." Client. Me. Jason choked on his own breath. Aunt Marlene gasped softly. And my mother, she didn't move, didn't blink. She just stared at him as if the floor had been pulled out from beneath her. I folded my arms. "You wanted a legal conversation," I said, "so I made sure I wasn't walking into one alone." Attorney Hale set his folder on the table with a quiet thud, the kind of sound that promised consequences. "I understand you've prepared documents," he said, addressing the lawyers. "Before anything is discussed, we'll need to review the legality of the requests, the circumstances under which my client was summoned, and any coercive behavior that may have occurred." Coercive? He said it loudly enough that everyone flinched. My mother finally found her voice. Why would you bring a lawyer?" I met her eyes, calm and steady. "Because," I said, "I don't walk into traps anymore." Attorney Hale didn't waste a second. He opened his folder, slid out a sleek stack of documents, and placed them neatly on the table, directly over the papers they had tried to make me sign. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone. "Before my client reviews anything you've prepared," he said calmly, "we need to address a few irregularities." I watched the color drain from the room. The lawyers shifted uncomfortably. My relatives froze. My mother clasped her hands so tightly her knuckles turned white. Hale pulled out the first sheet. "Let's start with this." He handed it to the nearest lawyer, who skimmed it and immediately stiffened. "That's impossible," the lawyer muttered under his breath. "It's not impossible," Hale replied. "It's a copy of the initial estate agreement, including the clause stating that any attempt to coerce, pressure, or manipulate the beneficiary nullifies all claims made by outside parties." My mother's mouth fell open. That can't be real. Your father never—" "He did," Hale cut in, "and he made me the executor's secondary counsel years ago." He turned to me with a respectful nod. "Your father was meticulous." Next, Hale slid another document forward, this time toward Aunt Marlene. "This," he said, "is proof of multiple attempts to access the estate accountant's private portal using your email address. Unauthorized attempts, by the way." She gasped, clutching her chest. I didn't, that wasn't—" Hale didn't even blink. "We also have bank statements showing sudden transfers from your accounts that match the fees for a financial advisor known for illegal inheritance consultation." Marlene's lips trembled. She looked like she might faint. Then Hale turned to Uncle Robert. "And you," he said, placing another paper in front of him, "have been contacting buyers regarding the property my client legally owns. You attempted to negotiate a sale for a commission." Robert's jaw locked. "That's a lie." "No," Hale replied, sliding out printed emails. "This is your correspondence, complete with timestamps." Finally, Hale addressed the entire room. "All of this demonstrates intentional interference, coercion, and an organized effort to pressure the beneficiary into relinquishing legally protected assets." My family stared at the table, silent, exposed, powerless. Hale closed his folder with a crisp snap. "And that," he said, "is why my client will not be signing anything today." I sat back, watching their faces collapse under the weight of their own scheme. For the first time all night, they understood. This wasn't their inheritance. This was their downfall. The moment Attorney Hale finished speaking, the room seemed to tilt. Every relative who had been loud and confident only minutes earlier now sat frozen, faces pale and stiff, like statues caught mid-collapse. But no reaction was as dramatic or as predictable as my mother's. She blinked rapidly, her lips trembling, her posture collapsing inward as though someone had pulled the strings out of her spine. This can't be happening," she whispered. "We were just trying to help. We weren't forcing anything." Her voice cracked on the last word. Hale didn't respond. He didn't need to. The evidence laid across the table spoke louder than any argument she could muster. My mother turned to me suddenly, reaching out as though she expected me to embrace her. "Honey, you know me," she pleaded. "I would never hurt you. This is all a misunderstanding. I didn't know they were doing all this. I didn't ask them to—" "Mom," I said quietly, "you arranged this meeting." Her mouth opened, closed, trembled. "That's not fair," she whispered. "I just thought you needed guidance, advice, support." Support. The same word she had twisted a dozen times already. But this time, her tone shifted from fragile to frantic. She grabbed the nearest document and shoved it aside like clearing the table would erase everything. "Why would you bring a lawyer? Why would you do this to me?" she demanded, voice rising. "Don't you trust your own family?" Uncle Robert muttered, "This is getting out of hand." But she didn't hear him. She was too far gone. Then came the tears, hot, dramatic, rolling down her cheeks with perfect theatrical timing. "I've sacrificed everything for you," she sobbed. "I raised you alone. I gave up my life for you. And this is how you repay me? By humiliating me in front of everyone?" It would have been convincing if I hadn't seen her flip this exact switch 100 times before. I stayed still, letting her words evaporate into the air. My mother wasn't crying because she was hurt. She was crying because she had been caught, because her plan had fallen apart, because for the first time she wasn't in control. And beneath the tears, I saw something else. Fear. The realization that the leverage she thought she had over me no longer existed. For a long moment, no one spoke. The only sound in the room was my mother's shaky breathing as she wiped her tears, trying to salvage whatever sympathy she could gather from the wreckage of her performance. But Attorney Hale was unmoved. He waited until the silence felt heavy enough, then spoke with a calm that cut sharper than any shouting ever could. "Since we've clarified the attempted interference," he began, "let's discuss the consequences." The word consequences snapped every head up like a whip. Even the lawyers straightened, their earlier arrogance evaporating into nervous restraint. Hale continued, unfolding yet another document, this one thicker, more official looking. "Under state law," he said, "pressuring a beneficiary into relinquishing assets through coercion, emotional manipulation, or coordinated interference is grounds for legal penalties, in some cases, substantial ones." Aunt Marlene made a strangled noise at the word penalties. Uncle Robert clicked his tongue, a gesture somewhere between irritation and fear. "And because the attempts were documented," Hale added, tapping the stack of evidence with deliberate precision, "any further actions to interfere could result in civil charges." Jason swallowed hard. "Civil charges?" "Yes," Hale replied, "meaning damages, fines, potential injunctions." My mother's tears stopped instantly, as if fear had overridden the faucet. "You can't do this," she whispered. "We're family." Hale raised an eyebrow. "My client has not pursued any charges. Yet." He emphasized the last word like a loaded pause. "But she will not tolerate further harassment, pressure, or unauthorized attempts to access her inheritance." The room seemed to shrink around them. "And one more thing," Hale added, lifting the final document. "Your father appointed me as the legal observer for any estate-related meetings, meaning any future discussions must go through me." My relatives collectively deflated. My mother's face twisted, confusion, anger, disbelief, all battling at once. You planned this," she whispered to me, as though the idea were impossible. "No," I said calmly. "You did, when you invited lawyers." Hale closed his folder. "This meeting is over," he declared, "and any future attempts to manipulate my client will be met with immediate legal action." The tables weren't just turned. They were flipped, bolted down, and locked in place, on my side. When Attorney Hale announced the meeting was over, the room fell into a stunned stillness, the kind that follows an explosion, when everyone is too shocked to speak, too shaken to move. My relatives sat frozen, each of them silently processing the reality that the trap they'd built so carefully had snapped shut on themselves instead. I stood slowly, feeling lighter than I had in years. Not triumphant, not vindictive, just free. For the first time, the weight of their expectations, their demands, their entitlement wasn't pressing on my shoulders. It was still sitting on the table, untouched, unsigned, exactly where it belonged. My mother's voice cracked behind me. "Please don't leave like this. We can fix this. We can talk. We're still family." Family. Funny how that word only appeared when they needed something. I turned to face her. Her eyes were wide, desperate, searching for the version of me who used to bend, soften, cave. But that version of me was gone. "Mom," I said quietly, "we could have talked. But you didn't invite me to talk. You invited me to surrender." Her expression crumpled, but I held steady. "You didn't ask how I was doing. You didn't ask what I wanted. You planned a meeting to take something that was never yours, and you thought I'd sit here and let it happen." She reached for my arm, but I stepped back gently. Not to hurt her, but to protect myself. "Losing my father was hard enough," I continued. "I won't lose myself, too." Attorney Hale gathered his papers, giving the room one last warning glance. "If anyone contacts my client outside approved channels," he said, "you will be hearing from me." No one argued. I walked to the door, my steps steady, the air behind me thick with shock, resentment, and the undeniable truth that everything had changed. At the doorway, I paused. Not for them, but for myself. Then I walked out, letting the cold evening air fill my lungs. I wasn't running. I wasn't escaping. I was reclaiming every piece of peace they had tried to take from me. The night air felt different when I stepped outside, cleaner, sharper, almost like it was washing away the last 20 minutes of chaos still echoing in my mother's living room. Attorney Hale walked beside me in silence until we reached the driveway. He paused, giving me a small nod of approval. "You handled yourself." "Well," he said, "for the first time all evening, I let out a genuine breath. Thank you. For everything." He gave a faint smile. "Your father knew this day might come. That's why he asked me to keep certain documents sealed until necessary." I blinked. "Sealed?" Hale opened his briefcase once more and handed me a thin envelope, my father's handwriting on the front. My chest tightened as I recognized the familiar, looping letters. "I was instructed to give you this," he said, "only after your family attempted to challenge the inheritance." My hands trembled slightly as I slid the letter out. My father's words, simple but steady, filled the page. "If you're reading this, it means they tried to take what I left for you. I'm sorry. But I knew they might. That's why I added protections. Not for the money, but for you. I trust your judgment. I trust your strength. And I want you to build a life that's yours, not one shaped by their expectations." My throat tightened. Below the letter was an attached document, a final amendment to the will. It stated that any proven attempt to coerce or pressure me would permanently bar the involved parties from receiving any future financial benefit from the estate, a complete safeguard, one they never knew existed. I folded the letter carefully, holding it close. For years, they told me family meant loyalty, obedience, sacrifice, but my father knew the truth. Family is not measured by blood. It's measured by the people who choose to protect you, not the ones who try to control you. As I walked away that night, I realized something powerful. They had lost their leverage. I had found my freedom, and my father, he had given me the strength to choose myself.